They came with guns, but the bullets weren't what changed Africa. The real weapon was the story. For centuries, Africa was called the Dark Continent, not because of its people, but because someone turned off the light of truth. This is how the mind of a continent was colonized. Long before Europe's ships arrived, Africa had its own systems of knowledge, its own empires, its own brilliance. There were universities in Timbuktu, where thousands of manuscripts spoke of science, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. There were the bronzes of Benin, the pyramids of Kush, the walls of Great Zimbabwe, and the golden wealth of Mali. Africa was not waiting to be discovered. It was thriving, but that was not the story the colonizers wanted told. When the explorers arrived, they didn't come just with curiosity, they came with conviction, the belief that they were superior. And so began the rewriting of Africa. Europe carved Africa like a map on a dinner table. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, they drew borders with rulers and ink, cutting through tribes, families, and centuries of unity. But even worse, they redrew our past. They said Africa had no history before they came. They claimed we had no written language, no architecture, no civilization. They called our kingdoms, tribes, and our leaders, chiefs, even when they ruled vast territories. To make the world believe their lie, they wrote our history books for us. And we were forced to read them. They built schools, but not to teach freedom. In these schools, African children were taught to admire Europe and despise Africa. To see their ancestors as uncivilized, to dream of whiteness, and to shrink from their own reflection. They learned that civilization began in Greece, that wisdom came from the West, and that the English or French language was a sign of intelligence. And so, generation after generation, we began to forget who we were. We spoke the colonizers' tongue more fluently than our own. We learned to laugh at our accents, to see our proverbs as primitive, and to trade our traditional names for English ones, just to sound acceptable. Then came religion, a powerful tool in the colonization of the mind. They told us that our gods were demons, that our ancestors' shrines were evil, that our way of life was darkness, and theirs was light. They replaced our spiritual systems with theirs. Our priests became outcasts, our names were changed, our calendars, our festivals, our understanding of the universe, all rewritten to fit a foreign faith. And as the temples burned and the drums fell silent, so too did the confidence of a people once proud of their identity. Then came cinema, books, and the radio. Images of Africa began to circulate across the world, not as a place of kings and scholars, but as a jungle of chaos and poverty. Hollywood portrayed Africa as a land of tribes, disease, and danger. News outlets focused only on war, hunger, and corruption. And slowly, even Africans began to internalize those images. If the world saw Africa as inferior, then surely, many thought, maybe it was true. That is the cruelty of mental colonization, when the oppressed begin to believe the story of the oppressor. But truth has a way of returning. In the 20th century, Africa began to reclaim its voice. Writers, thinkers, and revolutionaries emerged to challenge the lie. People like Chinua Achebe, who wrote Things Fall Apart to show the dignity of pre-colonial life. Ngũgĩ Thiong'o, who abandoned English literature to write in his native Gikuyu language. Fela Kuti, who used music to wake a sleeping generation. Thomas Sankara, who told Africa to stand tall, rename itself, and feed itself again. They reminded us that to fight colonization, we must first decolonize the mind. And today, the fight continues, not with guns, but with knowledge. Across the continent, young Africans are digging through archives, reading old manuscripts, restoring artifacts, and telling stories that were buried for centuries. We are learning that our history didn't begin with slavery, and that our ancestors were scientists, architects, astronomers, and philosophers long before Europe's Renaissance. We are remembering our languages, reclaiming our art, and teaching our children that to be African is not a disadvantage, it is a heritage of strength. They colonized our land, they colonized our stories, they colonized our minds. But today, Africa is unmasking itself, because to free a people, you must first free their mind.